My name is Michael McCoy. I am the youngest son of Sweet Georgia Brown. She was a student of the Fabulous Moolah and her ex-husband, Buddy Lee, which was my mother's promoter. And I'm here today on the property that Moolah used to reside in to kind of set the record straight on some things. You know, people saying that Moolah was a evil, cruel woman. They said that she got women on drugs, such as my mother. She had them exploited with sex and so forth on. And I come to say that the Moolah that I met wasn't that person. Now, I know there was a story that was done in the Columbia Free Times and the Metro Spirit in Augusta. It talked about how Moolah did my mother, but that wasn't my perspective of it. I had other people doing interviews, such as my oldest sister. She did an interview and she gave her perspective as Moolah. But the Moolah that I knew, that I met, invited me into her home, treated me just like a royal king. She was very polite to me. She was very nice to me. And when I came to Moolah, I was in search for my father. I wasn't in search for what happened back in the 60s or 50s or even the early 70s. That was not a concern of mine. The concern that I was looking for was try to put some closure on my life of who my father was. And I felt that since Moolah knew my mother and my mother wrestled for her, she would have some kind of information that she could give me. And she did that. She gave me the information. She told me that all roads lead to Nashville. And in Moolah's house back in that's behind me, there was a picture on her wall of Brooke Benton, Buddy Lee, and my mother. When I walked into the house, the first picture that I saw was that. And I asked her, I said, who is this white guy that's in the picture with my mother? And she was like, well, that was your mother's promoter. You know, I said, okay. I said, you know, it's just kind of strange because this guy kind of favored me a little bit. And she kind of smirked and smiled and said, well, like I said, all roads lead to Nashville. And what she was telling me that Rita Cortez and Buddy Lee was in Nashville. And that's when I started the search for my father in Nashville. Now, my search wasn't to try to bring any bad against Moolah. People putting out stories that Moolah used my mother as a prostitute. She caused my mother to be on drugs. And I come to say today that that's not true. That's not true at all. Especially knowing the Moolah that I had grew to know, that who treated me real nice, who invited me into her home, stayed in contact with me, and even before she died, she even embraced me with love. And even Mae Young even told me, she said, you know, Lydian would have loved to know that you came to her homegoing. And I was at her homegoing. And she said, Lydian always talked about you. But for the people out there that always, you know, thinking that because that story came out, that the Fabulous Moolah, that who was a legend. Now listen to me now. I'm Michael McCoy. My mother is Sweet Georgia Brown. I'm not a fake, I'm not a phony, and I'm not fronting today. And nobody is coercing me to say what I'm saying. Moolah did the right thing, and she helped my mother. And that's what I want to say to you all today.
So, Michael, you said that your sister had a negative view of Moolah or opinion of Moolah. Why do you feel that she might have had that opinion?
Because my sister, you remember now, my sister is much older than I am. And my sister was on the scene. And when, you know, the recollection that my sister said is that when Moolah and Buddy Lee, when they came back in town, they drove my mother home to our house. And she was only, my mother was only able to stay, you know, 15, 20 minutes because they had to get back on the road and get going again. And my oldest sister didn't want my mother to leave. And she wanted my mother to spend more time with us and whatnot. And my sister used to cry all the time because she wanted to be with my mother. And she wanted my mother to stay home with us. And so she felt at that time that Moolah was keeping our mother from us. And see, but if anybody know anything about the times in the 60s, you know, it was tough. I'm not saying Buddy Lee did anything wrong. I'm not saying Moolah did anything wrong. But as being a wife back in the 60s, even if Moolah knew anything that was going on, she wasn't in a position to say anything. Wives just didn't say nothing. You know, they just went along with what their husbands told them, and because, hey, you know, they didn't run anything. If they wanted to be on the streets, you know, they just kept their mouth shut. So Moolah very well may have known some things, but she couldn't say nothing. She wasn't privileged to say anything.
Do you feel like because of Moolah finding Rita Cortez and Buddy Lee in her own house one time, and then she ended the relationship right then and there, do you feel if she were privy to that information of your mother and her husband at the time, Buddy Lee, do you feel like she would have, I know you said that she might not would have said anything, but do you feel, knowing that information about Rita and her reaction to that, do you feel like she would have cut things off with Buddy Lee?
Well, I think she would have, because, you know, listen, do you feel that if you come home and you see your husband in the bed with a black woman, not a white woman, but a black woman, a young girl, you know, what would you do? Well, you'll be furious. You'll be mad. You will be upset. But, you know, even though that I feel that Moolah was she was a go-getter, and in order to have something, you got to be a go-getter, and that's what the woman was, a go-getter. You know, hey, listen, I have the choice. You have the choice if you want to stay in a situation or get out of a situation. If they say that Moolah robbed the girls, well, then why the girls didn't just walk off and not come back? Why did the girls stay for years? If you take me on the road and you beat me up, you making me take drugs, you making me sleep with people, and I don't want to do that, then the first time I see daylight, I'm out of there. And, you know, and the thing is now, in quote, I wanna say on record is that now, still yet now today, I still hadn't found out if Buddy Lee is actually my father. Now, I tell people that say that, no, there ain't no way. Well, you do the math. You know, better than that, the eyes can see. Look at photographs. Look at him, look at me. That's how they used to do DNA years ago.
Absolutely.
You know, you can look at, you know, let me tell you something. Boys, they take the traits of their fathers. They really do. Boys look just like their daddy. You know, the only difference between him and me, that I'm just a little darker. And what they should do, you know, just like they removed, you know, what I feel that would have been a great accomplishment for women wrestling, the Fabulous Moolah at the WWE for the WrestleMania. I think they should not just look at what some of the wrestling world say, but they need to look at the overall picture, the majority, and say that, listen, this woman paved the way for women wrestlers. It's what it is. She was the greatest. You can't take that away.
So, Michael, another thing that came up in the newspaper article that you're now infamous for in the wrestling world was the fact that Moolah would have your mother go into the trunk of the car. That was part of the times as we understand it. Could you clarify that at all?
Yeah, and that's what she had to do. She had to they had to hide her in the trunk of the cars, and then even on the bus, she had to hide up under the seats because of the KKK. And, you know, actually, I hate that they did that to her, but actually, I'm glad they did that to her, because if they wouldn't have, I wouldn't have known my mother, you know, the years that I did know her.
So it wasn't a cruel practice just from Moolah to punish your mother or anything?
No,
like that.
no. That was a standard thing.
If anything, maybe to protect her.
Protect her, because if they wouldn't have done that, then they probably would have hung my mother, or they probably would have raped her, and that's something that they did. And you know, and even you know, I even asked, you know, some other black female wrestlers, you know, that also, and they told me the same thing. So yeah, we had to hide in the trunk of cars. We had to hide up under the seats of buses. You know, sometimes, you know, they didn't have time, so when they rolled up, when they went down these long dark roads, you know, then they rolled up on the Ku Klux Klan, they had to hurry up and put them on the floorboard and cover them up. And see, because the Klan kept looking in the windows, and they just kept on driving. But if they would have saw a young black girl in that car, ain't no telling what they would have done. So that wasn't a practice that they was being cruel to my mother. That was a practice of they was protecting my mother.